Ethan Blackwood was the kind of person who lit up a room the moment he walked in. With his tousled dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and an infectious smile, he commanded attention effortlessly. As the founder of a rapidly growing tech startup in San Francisco, he was not just a boss, he was a visionary. I had been his assistant for years, and while I admired his brilliance, there was a deeper connection that I had kept hidden beneath layers of professionalism. Every morning, I arrived at the office early to prepare for the day ahead. The sleek glass building reflected the vibrant energy of the city, and as I settled into my workspace, I often found myself lost in thought about Ethan. He had an uncanny ability to inspire those around him, yet he remained blissfully unaware of the impact he had on my heart. I was Liam Hart, his dedicated assistant, and for all my intelligence and ambition, I felt like a shadow in his bright world. Our days were filled with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late-night work marathons. Ethan would often lean over my desk to discuss project details, his proximity sending my heart racing. I would catch myself stealing glances at him, his hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke about new ideas or strategies. Each interaction felt charged with unspoken words, yet I remained silent, trapped in my own feelings. One afternoon, as we prepared for a pitch to potential investors, Ethan burst into the office with his usual enthusiasm. "Liam, you won't believe what just happened." His excitement was contagious as he recounted a conversation with a major tech company interested in partnering with us. I couldn't help but smile at his passion, it was one of the many things I loved about him. "That's amazing, Ethan. This could change everything for us," I replied, trying to keep my tone professional even as my heart swelled with admiration. He grinned at me, that dazzling smile lighting up his face. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been incredible through all of this." His words sent a thrill through me, but they also deepened the ache in my chest. How could I ever tell him how much he meant to me when he saw me only as an assistant? As the weeks passed, our workload intensified. Ethan's drive to succeed was relentless. He worked late into the night while I often stayed by his side, organizing files and preparing presentations. Each moment spent together felt like a double-edged sword, an opportunity to be near him but also a reminder of my unrequited love. One evening, after an exhausting day filled with meetings and deadlines, we found ourselves alone in the office. The city lights twinkled outside like stars scattered across the night sky. Ethan leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. "You know, Liam, sometimes I wonder if all this is worth it," he said, running a hand through his hair. I looked at him, surprised by his vulnerability. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. "I love what I do, but sometimes it feels so lonely at the top," he admitted. There was a heaviness in his voice that struck a chord within me. "Loneliness can be tough," I replied carefully. "But you have people who care about you, your team believes in you." He nodded but didn't meet my gaze. "I know, but sometimes it feels like no one really understands me." In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to reach out and tell him that I understood him better than anyone else ever could. But fear held me back, the fear of losing what little connection we had. As we continued to talk about work and dreams for the future, I felt a familiar pang of longing wash over me. It was moments like these that made me question everything, my role as his assistant versus my feelings as someone who cared deeply for him. The evening wore on, until finally we decided to call it a night. As we packed up our things, Ethan turned to me with that same dazzling smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Thanks for always being there for me, Liam," he said sincerely. "Always," I replied quietly. As I walked out of the office behind him, the weight of unspoken words lingered in the air between us. Little did I know that soon everything would change, the dynamics of our relationship would shift in ways I could never have anticipated. The morning of the engagement announcement dawned bright and clear, the sun casting a warm glow over San Francisco. I arrived at the office earlier than usual, my heart racing with anticipation. Ethan had hinted at something big during our late-night discussions, but I never imagined it would be this. As I settled into my desk, I felt a mix of excitement and dread swirling within me. The office buzzed with energy as my colleagues filtered in, each one buzzing about the day's events. I could hear snippets of conversation about Ethan's latest project and the upcoming announcement. My heart sank as I realized that everyone was oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I had spent years supporting Ethan, pouring my heart into our work together, and now it felt like everything was about to change. When Ethan finally arrived, he was a whirlwind of enthusiasm. He strode into the office with his usual confidence, wearing a tailored suit that accentuated his athletic build. His eyes sparkled as he greeted everyone, and I couldn't help but admire him from my desk. But beneath my admiration lay a deepening sense of loss. "Good morning, team," he called out, his voice booming with excitement. "I have some incredible news to share." The room fell silent, all eyes on him as he stood at the front of the office. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I prepared myself for whatever was coming next. "I'm thrilled to announce that I'm engaged," he declared, his smile radiant as he held up his hand to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Gasps filled the room, followed by applause and cheers. My heart plummeted as reality crashed over me like a wave. Ethan was engaged, he was taking a step into a future that didn't include me in the way I had always hoped. I forced myself to clap along with everyone else, but inside, I felt hollow. The joy radiating from my colleagues only amplified my despair. As they crowded around Ethan to congratulate him, I stood back, feeling like an outsider in my own life. Sophia Lane entered moments later, her presence commanding attention as she joined Ethan at the center of the celebration. She was everything I wasn't: confident, poised, and strikingly beautiful. Watching her wrap her arms around Ethan made my heart ache in ways I couldn't articulate. They looked perfect together, and yet all I could feel was the weight of my unspoken feelings pressing down on me. As the celebration continued, I forced myself to engage with my coworkers, exchanging pleasantries while trying to mask my inner turmoil. But every time I caught sight of Ethan and Sophia together, laughter spilling from their lips, it felt like a dagger to my heart. Later that day, when the excitement began to fade and everyone returned to their tasks, Ethan approached me at my desk. "Liam, can you believe it?" His eyes sparkled with happiness. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Congratulations." "Thanks. It feels surreal," he said, leaning against my desk casually. "I couldn't wait to share it with you." I swallowed hard at his words. "I'm really happy for you," I managed to say, though the sincerity felt strained. "Let's celebrate later. Just us," he suggested with that infectious grin that always made my heart race. "Sure," I replied absently, knowing that spending more time with him would only deepen my pain. As the day wore on, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on work. My mind drifted back to memories of our late-night talks and shared dreams, the moments that had made me believe there might be something more between us. But now those dreams felt like distant echoes overshadowed by reality. When evening came and we closed up for the day, Ethan turned to me with excitement still bubbling beneath the surface. "I can't wait for you to meet Sophia properly. She's going to love you." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. The thought of meeting Sophia in a more personal setting filled me with dread. How could I pretend everything was fine when inside I was crumbling? "Yeah, I look forward to it," I replied weakly. As we walked out together into the fading light of day, laughter echoed from nearby restaurants and bars, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. The city felt alive and vibrant while I felt like a ghost drifting through it. That night would mark a turning point in our relationship, a moment where everything shifted irreversibly. As we shared drinks and stories later that evening at a small bar downtown, surrounded by laughter and celebration, I realized that this was not just an engagement, it was an end of an era for me. With each toast raised in honor of Ethan and Sophia's future together, my heart sank further into despair. As much as I wanted him to be happy, part of me longed for what could have been, a love unspoken yet deeply felt. The day after Ethan's engagement announcement felt like a heavy fog had settled over me. I woke up with a sense of dread, the weight of unspoken emotions pressing down on my chest. As I got ready for work, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My eyes were puffy from lack of sleep, and my reflection seemed to echo the turmoil inside me. I had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying every moment from the previous day in my mind, and it left me feeling more lost than ever. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. My colleagues were still riding the high of Ethan's engagement, sharing stories and congratulating each other as if they were part of the celebration themselves. I forced a smile as I walked through the office, but inside, I felt like an imposter in my own life. Everyone was so happy for Ethan and Sophia, and here I was, struggling to keep my composure. As the day progressed, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on my tasks. My mind kept drifting back to Ethan, the way he had looked when he announced his engagement, how his eyes sparkled with joy. Each time I thought of him with Sophia, a sharp pang of jealousy shot through me. It was a feeling I had never wanted to acknowledge but could no longer ignore. During lunch, I joined Oliver Reed, my best friend and confidant. He was an artist with wild curls and an infectious spirit that always managed to lift my mood, at least when I needed it most. We sat at our usual spot in a small cafe nearby, surrounded by the lively chatter of patrons enjoying their meals. "Hey, you okay?" Oliver asked, his keen eyes assessing me as he took a sip of his iced coffee. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, forcing a casual tone that didn't quite match how I felt inside. Oliver raised an eyebrow skeptically. "You've been off since yesterday. Is it about Ethan?" I sighed deeply, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "It's just, seeing him so happy with Sophia is harder than I thought it would be." "You're not happy for him?" Oliver probed gently. "Of course I am. But it feels like I'm losing him," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Oliver leaned back in his chair, considering my words. "You've got to tell him how you feel, Liam. You can't keep this bottled up forever." "I can't do that," I said firmly. "What if it ruins everything? What if he doesn't feel the same way?" "Then at least you'll know," he replied earnestly. "You deserve to be honest about your feelings." As much as I appreciated Oliver's encouragement, the thought of confessing my love for Ethan terrified me. What if it changed our dynamic forever? What if he pushed me away? The fear of losing him completely was paralyzing. After lunch, I returned to the office with a heavy heart. The hours dragged on as I tried to immerse myself in work, but every time I glanced at Ethan across the room, his laughter ringing out as he spoke with Sophia, I felt my resolve crumbling further. Later that afternoon, Ethan called me into his office for a quick meeting regarding an upcoming project presentation. As soon as I stepped inside, his energy enveloped me like a warm blanket. "Hey, thanks for coming in," he said cheerfully. "I wanted to go over some ideas before we present them next week." "Sure," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. As we discussed details and strategies, Ethan's passion was palpable. He spoke animatedly about our plans while gesturing enthusiastically with his hands. It was moments like these that made me fall for him all over again, the way he lit up when talking about his work. But then he mentioned Sophia again, how she had given him some great insights during their discussions about wedding planning, and each mention felt like another dagger to my heart. "Isn't she amazing?" Ethan asked, his eyes sparkling with admiration. "Yeah, she really is," I managed to reply through gritted teeth. Ethan noticed my tone shift and paused for a moment. "Liam, are you sure you're okay? You seem a bit off today." "I'm fine," I insisted too quickly. "Just tired from all the work lately." He nodded but didn't seem convinced. "If you need anything or want to talk about it, I'll be fine," I interrupted gently but firmly. "Really?" As we wrapped up our meeting, Ethan smiled at me warmly. "Thanks for always having my back." Those words struck me deeply, they were both comforting and painful at once. How could he be so oblivious to what lay beneath our friendship? The longing surged within me again, a desperate wish that things could be different. That evening, after work ended and everyone else left the office to celebrate Ethan's engagement elsewhere, Oliver convinced me to join him for dinner at our favorite bar downtown. He insisted that getting out would help clear my mind. As we settled into our seats at the bar, surrounded by laughter and music, Oliver ordered us drinks while I stared into my glass absent-mindedly. The atmosphere was vibrant, people were celebrating life in all its forms while all I could think about was how empty mine felt without Ethan by my side in that moment. "Liam," Oliver's voice broke through my thoughts as he slid a drink toward me. "Let's toast to friendship." I raised my glass half-heartedly but couldn't shake off the heaviness in my heart. "To friendship," I echoed quietly. As we sipped our drinks and shared stories from our pasts, moments filled with laughter and joy, I realized how much Oliver's presence grounded me amidst the chaos swirling around me regarding Ethan. But even as we talked and laughed together that night, part of me remained trapped in uncertainty, a longing for something more that seemed just out of reach. The days that followed Ethan's engagement announcement felt like a blur, each one blending into the next. I went through the motions at work, maintaining my professionalism while my heart felt like it was slowly breaking apart. Every time I saw Ethan, his happiness radiated like sunlight, and I couldn't help but feel like a moth drawn to a flame, hoping for warmth but knowing it would only lead to pain. As the weekend approached, I found myself in a state of turmoil. I had been wrestling with the idea of resigning from my position as Ethan's assistant. It felt like the only way to protect myself from the heartache of watching him build a life with someone else. But the thought of leaving him behind was equally unbearable. I was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, and every time I tried to untangle myself, I only found myself more ensnared. On Friday evening, after a long week filled with meetings and presentations, I finally made my way home. The city lights twinkled outside my window as I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages from Oliver checking in on me and reminders about Ethan's engagement party scheduled for Saturday night. The thought of attending filled me with dread and anxiety. I picked up my phone and texted Oliver, "I don't think I can go to the party tomorrow." Asterisk. His response came almost instantly, "You have to. It's important for Ethan, and you need to support him." Asterisk. I sighed heavily. He was right, Ethan deserved my support. But how could I be there when every smile exchanged between him and Sophia would feel like a dagger to my heart? I felt trapped between my loyalty to Ethan and my own emotional well-being. After a restless night filled with tossing and turning, I finally decided that I would attend the party. As much as it pained me, I couldn't let my feelings overshadow Ethan's happiness. The next day, I spent hours preparing, choosing an outfit that would make me feel confident while hiding the turmoil inside. A fitted navy blazer paired with a crisp white shirt seemed professional yet casual enough for the occasion. When I arrived at the venue, a beautiful rooftop space overlooking the San Francisco skyline, I was immediately struck by the festive atmosphere. String lights twinkled above us, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Laughter and music filled the air as guests mingled, celebrating Ethan and Sophia's engagement. As soon as I stepped inside, Ethan spotted me from across the room. His face lit up with that familiar smile that always made my heart race. "Liam, you made it," he exclaimed, crossing the room to greet me. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, forcing a smile despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "Great. Come meet Sophia," he said enthusiastically, taking my arm and leading me through the crowd. As we approached Sophia, she turned to greet us with her radiant smile. "Liam, so glad you could come," she said warmly. "Thanks for having me," I replied, trying to sound genuine even as my heart sank further into despair. Ethan introduced us properly, and as they chatted about wedding plans and future aspirations, I felt like an outsider in their world, a spectator watching two people who belonged together while I stood on the periphery. Throughout the evening, I tried to engage in conversations with other guests, but my mind kept drifting back to Ethan and Sophia. They were inseparable, laughing together effortlessly while I felt increasingly invisible. Each time Ethan glanced in my direction with that same warmth he always had for me, it only deepened my internal conflict. At one point during the party, Oliver found me standing by the railing overlooking the cityscape. "You look like you're about to disappear," he said lightly, trying to coax a smile out of me. "I'm fine," I replied too quickly. "Liam," he said gently, "you need to talk to him." I shook my head vehemently. "What good would that do? He's engaged. He's happy. But what about you?" Oliver pressed. "You can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not." His words resonated deeply within me. The truth was that every moment spent watching Ethan thrive beside Sophia felt like a reminder of what could never be mine. But how could I confess feelings that had been buried for so long? The fear of ruining our friendship paralyzed me. Just then, Ethan approached us with 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Hey, you two look deep in conversation." He handed us each a glass and raised his own in a toast. "To love and new beginnings." I forced myself to smile as we clinked glasses together. "To love," I echoed quietly. As we sipped our drinks, laughter erupted around us from other guests sharing stories about their own relationships, stories filled with joy and hope for the future. Each laugh felt like another reminder of what I longed for but could never have. Later in the evening, when Ethan led everyone outside for a group photo against the stunning backdrop of the city skyline, I stood off to the side, feeling more isolated than ever. As they posed together, Ethan wrapping his arms around Sophia while she beamed up at him, I felt an overwhelming urge to leave before tears betrayed me. Just as I turned to slip away unnoticed, Ethan caught sight of me again. "Liam, come join us," he called out enthusiastically. My heart raced as all eyes turned toward me. There was no escaping now. I forced myself forward into their midst where laughter rang out again as they arranged themselves for the photo. In that moment, surrounded by joy yet feeling utterly alone, I realized something had to change. This couldn't continue forever without tearing me apart inside. Afterward, as guests began mingling again and music played softly in the background, Oliver reappeared at my side once more. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "No," I admitted softly. "You need to tell him how you feel," he urged gently but firmly. "I can't," I replied desperately. "What if it ruins everything?" "But what if it doesn't?" Oliver countered passionately. "What if he feels something too? You'll never know until you try." His words hung in the air between us, a challenge that both terrified and intrigued me at once. As much as fear gripped me tightly like chains around my heart, part of me wondered what it would be like if those chains were finally broken. As we continued talking amidst laughter and celebration around us, an idea began forming, a spark igniting within me that perhaps it was time to confront not just my feelings but also what lay ahead for both Ethan and myself. The engagement party had come and gone, but the emotions it stirred within me lingered like a haunting melody. I spent the following days in a haze, moving through work with a sense of detachment. Each time I caught sight of Ethan, I felt the familiar ache in my chest, a reminder of the feelings I had buried so deep. The conversations we had shared since the party felt superficial, as if we were both playing roles in a script that neither of us truly believed. On the Friday following the party, I found myself in my usual spot at the office, staring blankly at my computer screen. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second stretching into eternity. I knew I had to make a decision. Either confront Ethan about my feelings or resign and walk away from everything we had built together. As I sat there contemplating my choices, Ethan walked into the office with his usual energy, his presence lighting up the room. He approached my desk with that familiar smile, but today it felt different, more intense, as if he sensed the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "Hey, Liam, got a minute?" he asked, leaning against my desk casually. "Of course," I replied, my heart racing as I braced myself for whatever was coming next. He motioned for me to follow him into his office, and as I stepped inside, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The door clicked shut behind us, creating an intimate space that felt charged with tension. "I wanted to talk about something important," Ethan began, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he exhibited when he was deep in thought. "I know things have been a bit different since the engagement announcement." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. My heart pounded in my chest as I prepared myself for whatever confession he was about to make. "I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you being there for me," he continued. "It means a lot to have someone like you by my side during this time." His words struck a chord within me, they were both comforting and painful. "I'm always here for you, Ethan," I said softly. He looked at me intently, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything I had kept hidden pressing against my chest. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." His expression shifted slightly, curiosity mixed with concern. "What is it?" I hesitated for a moment, battling the fear that threatened to swallow me whole. But this was it, this was my chance to be honest. "I've been struggling since your engagement announcement." Ethan's brow furrowed slightly as he processed my words. "Struggling? How so?" "I mean, it's hard for me to see you so happy with Sophia," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "I care about you deeply, more than just as your assistant." The silence that followed felt deafening. Ethan's eyes widened slightly as he absorbed what I had just confessed. "Liam, are you saying you have feelings for me?" "Yes," I replied, my heart racing as vulnerability washed over me like a wave. "I've tried to ignore it for so long because I didn't want to ruin our friendship or complicate things between us." Ethan took a step back, running his hand through his hair again, a sign that he was processing everything. "I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I was afraid," I admitted honestly. "Afraid of losing you completely if you didn't feel the same way." He looked at me intently, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside faded away. "Liam," he said softly, "you mean so much to me. You've always been there through everything." "But now," I interrupted gently, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "Now, you're engaged to someone else." "I know," he replied quietly. "But that doesn't change how important you are to me." The tension in the room shifted. It felt like we were standing on the edge of something monumental, a precipice that could lead us either toward deeper connection or irrevocable separation. "I don't want to come between you and Sophia," I said softly. Ethan took another step closer, his gaze unwavering. "You're not coming between us, this is about how we feel about each other." His words hung in the air between us like an unspoken promise. It was terrifying yet exhilarating, the possibility of what could be if we dared to explore our feelings further. Just then, there was a knock on the door before Sophia entered the office with her usual bright smile. The moment she saw us standing close together, her expression shifted slightly, curiosity mixed with confusion. "Hey, am I interrupting something?" she asked playfully. Ethan quickly stepped back and cleared his throat as if breaking from a trance. "No, just talking about work stuff," he replied too quickly. Sophia smiled but seemed to sense an undercurrent of tension in the room. "Okay. Well, dinner is almost ready downstairs, everyone is waiting for us." As she spoke, part of me felt relief wash over me while another part felt crushed by her presence. This was exactly what I had feared, the interruption that would pull Ethan back into his world with her while leaving me standing on the sidelines once more. "Yeah, we'll be down in just a minute," Ethan replied cheerfully before turning back to me with an intensity that made my heart race again. "Liam," he said quietly before Sophia could turn away completely. "We'll talk more later." I nodded slowly, feeling both hopeful and terrified at what lay ahead. As Sophia led Ethan out of the office and back into the bustling atmosphere of laughter and celebration below, I realized that everything had changed in that brief moment alone together, the air thick with unspoken possibilities. What would happen next? Would we find our way back to each other amidst all this chaos? Only time would tell. The evening unfolded like a dream, but beneath the surface, my heart was a storm of emotions. I had finally confessed my feelings to Ethan, and yet, as he walked out with Sophia, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just opened a door that would lead to more heartache. The party continued to buzz around me, laughter and music filling the air, but I felt more isolated than ever. I joined Oliver at the bar, where he was chatting with some colleagues. He caught my eye and raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing the turmoil swirling within me. "So, how did it go?" he asked, leaning closer as I approached. "Not how I expected," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did you tell him?" Oliver pressed, his eyes wide with curiosity. "I did," I admitted, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. But then Sophia walked in. Oliver frowned slightly. "That's tough. Did he say anything?" "He wants to talk more later," I said, trying to sound hopeful despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "Good. That's progress," he encouraged. "You need to figure this out." As the night wore on, I found myself lost in thought. The laughter around me felt distant as I replayed the moment in Ethan's office over and over again in my mind. His expression had been a mix of surprise and something else, something deeper that I couldn't quite place. Did he feel the same way? Or was he simply being kind because he didn't want to hurt me? Eventually, the party began to wind down. Guests started to trickle out, their voices fading into the night. Ethan and Sophia were still mingling with friends, but I could see him glancing in my direction every so often, his expression contemplative. When the last of our colleagues left and only a handful of us remained, Ethan finally made his way over to me. "Hey," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady despite the fluttering in my chest. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Of course," I said quickly, my heart racing as we stepped away from the remaining guests and found a quieter corner of the rooftop. The city skyline sparkled behind us like a sea of stars. The cool night air felt refreshing against my skin as we stood facing each other. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if we were both gathering our thoughts before diving into uncharted territory. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Ethan began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "About your feelings for me." I nodded slowly, feeling vulnerable under his gaze. I didn't mean to complicate things between you and Sophia. You didn't complicate anything, he replied firmly. You opened my eyes to something I've been avoiding for too long. My heart raced at his words. What do you mean? Ethan took a deep breath as if steeling himself for what was to come next. I care about you deeply, Liam, more than just as a friend or an assistant. He paused for a moment before continuing. But I'm engaged to Sophia. I know, I said quietly, feeling the weight of reality settle heavily on my shoulders. He ran a hand through his hair again, a sign of his inner conflict. I've been so focused on building this life with her that I didn't realize how much you mean to me until now. The admission hung in the air between us like a fragile thread connecting our hearts. So what does that mean for us? I asked softly. Ethan stepped closer, his expression earnest. It means I need time to figure things out. This is all so new and overwhelming. Time. The word felt heavy on my tongue as uncertainty washed over me again. Yes, he replied gently. I don't want to rush into anything without thinking it through properly. I nodded slowly, trying to process everything he was saying. Part of me wanted him to make a decision right then and there, to choose me over Sophia, but another part understood that this wasn't just about us, it was about his life and future too. I don't want you to feel pressured, I said finally. Take all the time you need. Thank you for understanding, Ethan said sincerely. You're an incredible person, Liam. We stood there for a moment longer, both lost in our thoughts as the city buzzed around us, the sounds of laughter fading into the night air. Eventually, Ethan broke the silence again. I should get back to Sophia, she's probably wondering where I am. Of course, I replied reluctantly. As we walked back toward the main area where Sophia was chatting with some friends, an uneasy tension settled between us again. It felt like we were both caught in limbo, hovering between friendship and something more while navigating uncharted waters filled with emotions we hadn't fully acknowledged before. When we reached Sophia's side, she smiled brightly at Ethan and then turned her gaze toward me. There you are. We were just talking about how amazing tonight has been. Yeah, Ethan replied casually but shot me a glance that spoke volumes, an unspoken promise that this conversation wasn't over yet. As we mingled for a little while longer before saying our goodbyes, I felt hopeful yet anxious about what lay ahead for us all. The road forward would be complicated, it would require patience and understanding from everyone involved. But deep down inside me flickered a small flame of hope, a belief that perhaps love could find its way through even the most tangled situations if given enough time and space to breathe. As we stepped out into the cool night air together for one last time before parting ways, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just the beginning of something profound, a journey toward discovering not only what love meant but also who we truly were meant to be together.